Welcome back to LifeSiteNews InFocus. You know, we are living in dark times, but you know, there's a saying about strength in adversity. It really is true that during really dark periods in history, we've had great heroes. And you know what? This is a pretty dark time. And we have amazing heroes. I'm going to show you some of those today because I think perhaps with all the complaints we get sometimes about, boy, there's so much negative news. There's been a lot of good news, even over the last few weeks. Maybe you've missed it. Stay tuned. This is LifeSiteNews in Focus. Okay, so with the huge news this week of the raid on President Trump's home, a lot of people might be feeling overwhelmed, like the forces arrayed against us are just massive, and what are we anyways? If they can do that to the president of the United States, the former president, if they can raid his bank account, what the heck can they do to us? Yeah, there's some legitimacy to that. But you know what? Every time things get dark, our Lord provides us the grace we need to continue to fight. In fact, it says in the Holy Bible, He will never give us a cross too difficult for us to bear. Check this out. Just a few weeks ago, remember there was a tremendous victory in Virginia where it was thought, oh, definitely we're going to have the Democrats. But no, there was a victory for the Republicans, a Republican who was ready to fight at least some of the way for life and family. It wasn't going to be so ridiculous. In fact, it was the ridiculous anti-life, anti-family push that was going on in Virginia that turned the tide. This is the report from our own Jim Hale. Check it out.
Political experts had written Virginia off as a solid blue state, becoming bluer with every election. But Democrats went too far. And as it turns out, Virginians didn't want to be Californians after all.
We had entirely liberal pro-abortion control from the governor to the House to the Senate, and they wiped out all of our pro-life laws. And the electorate reacted. The very next election that they had decisions, they picked a pro-life governor, pro-life lieutenant governor, pro-life attorney general, and a pro-life House. In every decision they could make, they repudiated what the liberals had done. And so I think that is encouraging for other states, and I think it's a good telling of what we hope to see with Senate elections when we have that opportunity.
The Family Foundation is calling for no less than a protection at conception bill. However, this is Virginia, where Democrats still control the state Senate, and those seats aren't up for re-election until November of 2023.
We want to see every state protect the unborn to the absolute possible extent that they can, but we also need folks to know that just because we got a ruling that allows us to protect up until the point of as early as conception doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen tomorrow. This is still a marathon, not a sprint in many, many states. This is not, we see an end line where there'll be a society where we value human life, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're there in every state. We're excited for the states that are red and that are able to do that immediately. And those of us that are not, we're gonna have to keep working, keep working, keep working.
That means working on all family issues and increasingly against Republicans who've gone wobbly on traditional marriage and standing up to the LGBT agenda to undermine religious freedom.
There are many, many elected officials, Republican and Democrat, that simply do not understand to this day, despite what we've seen, the deep connection between same-sex marriage and gender fluidity and religious freedom. They don't understand that you cannot continue to move in the direction of what the LGBT agenda would want and also continue to protect what is our first freedom in America, which is our ability to exercise our faith in the public square and in our lives and in the marketplace.
With rumors of Virginia's new Republican governor mulling a presidential bid, Glenn Youngkin is now being scrutinized by some for not being conservative enough. Victoria says, hold on.
Well, I respond with, we're in Virginia. We had Governor Ralph Northam last, so no one is perfect. We don't expect any elected official to walk in and do everything perfectly. And sometimes I think we, get in this idea that if we elect our guy, whoever that might be, that magically they're going to do it all right. And it's very rarely the case, right? So he's not going to be perfect. And he didn't come to politics from a background of being in public policy. So for him, there's a lot of learning happening simultaneously with leading. And that's a big challenge. So certainly with every elected official, we push for more, we want more, we continue to move them towards that which they can accomplish. It's a challenging thing for a governor, though, when they don't have the legislature in complete agreement.
Heavenly Father, we lift our eyes up to the hills. Where does our help come from? Our help comes from you, maker of heaven and earth.
But despite the victories, we can never, ever, ever sit still. We can never think, we can relax now, even though, of course, on a Sunday you get to relax. But generally speaking, it's not time for relaxation. Check out what happened in West Virginia, thought to be a conservative bastion, so that, this is where we expected the victories from, and so on. Jim Hale reports for LifeSite from what happened in West Virginia with a betrayal on the agenda of pro-life that was just stunning. Have a look.
Buchanan, West Virginia has the old-fashioned feel of the patriotic America of yesteryear. It's a conservative place in a conservative state that has a Republican supermajority in the House, Senate, and a pro-life governor. Just one abortion clinic remains in the capital of Charleston. And after the fall of Roe v. Wade, West Virginia was poised to ban abortion entirely.
My expectation was we were going to stand behind our total prohibition on abortion, which we have had in the state code since 1863.
Yep. But
that's not what has happened.
What happened was a complete gutting of our proposed ban that State Senator Robert Karnes says turned a pro-life bill into a pro-abortion bill.
I think the real problem is that too many people forgot what we're talking about here. If you understand that we're talking about destroying a human life and the focus is on preventing that, we would have got an entirely different product. Unfortunately, the Democrats, as well as a couple of Republicans, managed to change that conversation into how the exceptions ought to be handled, how they ought to be shaped, how broadly they could make them. And what got lost in that whole mix were the babies that we're trying to save.
How egregious is this?
It is a pro-abortion bill. How egregious this is that we're talking about a bill that was totally clean, that would have protected countless lives in West Virginia, and these guys totally gutted it. These Roe Republicans totally gutted it and turned it into an abortion bill.
What's happening here in West Virginia is really a mirror for the battle of the soul of the Republican Party nationwide. Is this going to be a party of principles and family values, or is it going to be a party of weakness and compromise?
It's very frustrating, obviously. A lot of times you get elected, and I was, of course, part of getting elected and turning West Virginia into a Republican state, and you think, great, now we can go out and do all this conservative stuff, and you find out pretty quickly just because somebody has an R beside of their name doesn't necessarily mean that they hold true to Republican values. And so, personally, very frustrating, but not entirely surprising.
There is absolutely no question about it. Protecting life in West Virginia is one of the big motivating factors that causes the Republican base to show up in elections. And so for these Roe Republicans to run on a pro-life platform, like, for example, one of the Republicans that ended up voting for the decriminalization of abortion has said countless times that he is a 100% pro-life voting record, okay? That's what he's ran on. He's ran on that years past. And so now that he has had the opportunity to actually protect life at conception like what he promised, he voted the wrong way on this.
In the far eastern part of the state, Senator Patricia Rucker of Harpers Ferry says it's time for Republican voters to demand to know exactly what politicians mean when they say they're pro-life.
Exactly. I could tell you that I promise from now on to be asking them, do you believe there's any exceptions to life being protected? When do you think life begins? What stage? Those are questions that are very crucial and important. And can we ever put conditions on when somebody's life is worth protecting and when it's not? What conditions would you put on it? Those are questions we now need to ask in these forums, in these opportunities. When someone says they want to run for office, we must get away from just saying, are you pro-life or not? Because there's many of these politicians who claim they're pro-life, but they clearly have not thought it all the way through or are frankly lying. After 50 years of horror, of murdering innocent children, we have got to understand that if we don't protect life from the very moment of conception to natural death, if we don't, as an understanding of the fabric of our nation, understand that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness can't happen without life first.
But we still are fighting. In fact, this fight goes on and on and on. And one of the things I wanted to show you was a little video that Jim did right in the middle of the night. We had two pro-lifers who were fighting like crazy and therefore jailed. And they're fighting by being willing to stand up inside abortion clinics and offer life to women who are being faced with, pressure to have an abortion. And for doing so, for daring to stand up for the rights for the unborn, they are arrested, they're put in jail. I'm speaking of Lauren Handy as well as the great hero, Joan Andrews Bell, who has spent years in prison already for being pro-life. They were released at midnight and a couple weeks ago. And Jim Hale from LifeSite News was there to capture this. We have these stupendous heroes in the pro-life movement who you've heard of, who you watched already with the rescuing of all the babies' bodies that were slated for disposal and gave them beautiful burials instead. However, there are a lot of pro-life heroes who are in the background that nobody knows anything about. Pro-life heroes who are struggling from day to day with themselves, large families, and then they get a child who is disabled and they're encouraged to abort that baby, and the doctors are pressuring them to withdraw life support and so on. At LifeSite News, we helped with a Life Funder. And by the way, if you don't know about it, that's our crowdfunding platform that we put out because GoFundMe and the like were not allowing great pro-life, pro-family ventures to be on there, sometimes withdrawing funds from those that have been collected. So we started Life Funder a couple years ago, and we've been able to support very many awesome pro-life, pro-family ventures there. Check this out. This is the Jobin family. Carol Jobin had a baby like this, and she was, given a Life Funder, and working with Knights of Columbus as well as Mennonites, we were able to help her out. And this is a video capture of the result of a lot of the help that you were able to bring to the Jobin family. Miles Vasilius, one of our video reporters, was there. Check this out.
Yay, Lauren! Joan, how are you feeling?
Good, but I feel terrible. We missed LifeSite News Gala.
Yeah, no, the gala's not in a couple of weeks, so you can still go.
Right. Oh, I thought.
Joan, why do you keep doing this?
Because babies keep dying. And I hope, please God, that soon they'll stop dying. So that's the only reason, if our little brothers and sisters have been killed, we can never quit. And we can never stop trying to defend them.
Joan, what is your message to all those who love you so much?
Oh, I love them so much back, and I keep them in my prayers and close to my heart every day of my life.
Is it?
So much.
Thank you, Joan, for all you do. We love you.
Oh, Jim, thank you so much. God bless you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing really great, actually. I'm energized. I'm ready to go back out to the streets, and I'm so encouraged by all the many letters people sent me. And, rescue is the past, present, and future of our movement.
Why? Why does it need to be that way?
Because it's the only way to directly intervene between the oppressor and the oppressed, between the murderer and the baby. And radical acts of violence need to be met with radical acts of love.
Amen to that.
Are there moments of despair when you're locked up in there?
I mean, of course there is. I mean, we were in a modified solitary confinement, so we were in our cells for 22 hours and only let out 2 hours each day. And it was because they said we were in the news because of the babies we found in March. And so, but you find a sense of peace when you surrender everything to Jesus.
Lauren, what is your message to all those people who've been praying for you?
One, thank you, and your prayers mean the world. And in this time where things are so uncertain with laws going to the state and some cities not even enforcing those laws, that knowing that hope is a discipline and that each day we need to work towards what can I do to help moms, what can I do to save a baby, and we need to renew that commitment each day. And I'm out here today renewing my commitment and excited to go to the streets tomorrow.
Gosh, Lauren, we love you so much.
Thank you.
Lauren. Bye-bye.
But this battle is not just in America, not just in Canada, not in North America. It's actually global. And what's really weird about it is that the woke left uses the same tactics everywhere. Can you imagine they talk about conservatives and try and paint conservatives as racist? Even Clarence Thomas, who is black, he's an African American, and he's called racist by the left. And it's just unbelievable. But watch the truth. Jim Hale was out at an interview with CFAM, the pro-life group that works at the United Nations. And Rebecca Oas from CFAM explained how white Sweden was going after Africa in terms of targeting them for population control. Oh yes, there is racism, except it's not on the pro-life side. It's on the other side. Take a look.
Rebecca Oas of the Center for Family and Human Rights is blowing the whistle on Sweden. In her recent article titled "Rich White Sweden Targets Poor Black Africa," Oas says Sweden will spend $60 million in the next 4 years to promote abortion on people who don't want it.
I mean, Africa is the region of the world with the greatest number of countries. So from a voting bloc standpoint, they could be very powerful if they speak together. Also, we know that Africa is the region of the world that still has above replacement fertility. It has the highest fertility in the world. So obviously, for those who are concerned about population growth, it has long been a target. And of course, the narrative that we hear is that these poor women, they don't have access to family planning. They cannot control the size of their families. We must help them. When in reality, when you look at how many children women want to have, it is also the highest in the world. In sub-Saharan Africa, they want large families.
And Africa remains the most pro-life continent on Earth, with 9 countries banning it outright and only South Africa having no restrictions. But under the guise of healthcare, global family planners, funded by Sweden and other enlightened Western democracies, have been undermining Africa for years.
We've already seen how this plays out in other parts of the world where abortion restrictions exist still, in parts of Latin America, for example, where long before the laws were liberalized, even if they were, there was this black market for abortion pills. Yeah. And so we've seen, some of these groups like Aid Access that's now trying to ship abortion pills illegally to women in the United States. We've seen that same model happening overseas. The Women on Web group, which is founded by the same person, where they've been illegally providing abortions, around the world using pills as well as surgery. But especially as it's moved toward pills, it's become much more easy to get it into countries where it's illegal. And there are all kinds of risks associated with that. But, and of course, in our work at the UN, we see that the World Health Organization has been providing a lot of medical cover for this practice. They've basically framed abortion as a form of self-care, where, you don't need a doctor. They've been expanding the pool of potential providers to nurses and midwives and lower tier medical workers, even potentially pharmacists, which brings all kinds of conscience issues in as well. But, in addition to that, women themselves as providers. And so what these organizations do that are selling illegally abortion pills is they say, well, we're operating in accordance with WHO guidance. And so the WHO is basically providing them at least medical cover, if not legal cover, and saying, well, abortions that are illegal aren't necessarily unsafe if they're provided in accordance with guidelines by the WHO.
One of the words that we always hear is self-care. Do you cringe as much as I do when you hear that word?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, and we see this, the word abortion is often bracketed by it being safe abortion care, when you hear proponents talk about it. It's to put the word care there, making it sound like you say, like something that's not lethal. But yes, absolutely. The idea that, and also we hear, it being spoken about as something that is empowering, right? That it's about controlling your own body and, determining your own destiny. And, definitely trying to distance oneself from the idea that in order to self-actualize in this way, someone else must lose their life. And so, yes, you're absolutely right that this is a huge language issue.
The good news is the Swedens of the world have been punched in the gut by the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and African nations who aren't afraid to take a stand.
Well, I mean, one of the things that the abortion movement has been saying for a long time is that there's sort of this inevitable wave of change happening, and that, country after country is falling, like you say. And it is certainly true that some countries have fallen in pretty catastrophic ways on this issue. There have been, a few countries that have, in fact, strengthened their pro-life protections in law, in addition to the United States. And of course, the United States is huge in this regard, that even under a Democratic administration, this happens. And so, it's not that this is an inevitable wave that only goes one direction. And of course, the US is helpful in pushing back on that narrative of inevitability. And it also has to be said, that in all of the decades that they've been trying to push to create an international human right to abortion, and these are the most wealthy countries, the most powerful people in the world, they have still failed. Yeah. There is no consensus on this. It's not in any binding international human rights treaty. So, there is a lot that we can say we've had as successes. Certainly with a lot less funding behind it. So there is good news.
This battle, this fight, this war that we're experiencing, it's not only on the secular state. Not only in America, not only in Europe and Africa, it is also, sadly, in the church. In fact, what's been going on, as you know, if you're a viewer or a reader of LifeSite News, you know very well that what's happening with Pope Francis has been totally scandalous. We actually have cardinals being appointed and in there who are doing grave damage. In fact, one of the cardinals, who happens to be both the Archbishop of Luxembourg, actually the head of the Commission of European Bishops, was just appointed by Pope Francis as one of the leaders of this new synod on synodality that's going on. He's now, or was just recently, on a U.S. tour, believe it or not, starting in Chicago. And in Chicago, a great pro-life, pro-faith Catholic leader there by the name of Richard Smaglik got to him and did a sort of impromptu interview with Cardinal Hollerich on the question of homosexuality. Check this out. Here's exactly what he said, so you can see for yourself how corruption has infested even the church.
And I would like to ask you a very clear final question. After this case, do you believe that sodomy should be considered a grave sin?
I do not know what the Synod will bring. We will now listen to the people of God, what they express. I start getting in reports, the Relator General of the Senate. And so reading all of that, in September we make a first draft for the continental meetings, which will take place. I think that, first of all, I would never consider sexuality separated from love.
The Bible has taught for 2,000 years that sodomy is a sin, an abomination that cries out to heaven.
But the Bible also said we should stone the woman who is adulterous. The Bible has said that the sun turns around the earth. So the Bible have to give an interpretation to the
So the fundamental scriptural teaching on sin.
This is not a theological. No. It is. I know that I am in full agreement with Pope Francis.
Thank you, friends.
You can catch more of that interview at LifeSiteNews.com as Richard Smaglik was with me on the John-Henry Westen show. Please do check it out. But I want to show you also the pushback from faithful Catholics. When the Pope came to Canada, and yes, they had the smudging ceremony that caused grave scandal all over the place, but local Catholics chose to stand up. There is a great pro-life Catholic leader in Quebec City where the Pope was. His name is Georges Buscemi. He arranged for this beautiful rosary right outside where the Pope was going to be. And Miles Vasilius, our cameraman, was there, and I was there as well, and we prayed the rosary with some of the most holy priests a nun you'll ever see. And it was beautiful. Here's a few snippets of that, and the Pope literally walked right in front of us. In fact, I think the timing of the whole thing was rather miraculous. We show up, we're there, we're kneeling in the street. We're behind a little iron gate that they set up. But you know, the Pope literally walks in front of us, as do some of the cardinals, as you'll see. And it's beautiful. As you finish the first rosary, the bells start to peal, the Pope walks by. We finish the full 15 mysteries, or 15 decades of the rosary, and sing beautifully as Father's leading us. And it was really a grace-filled time. And as you see, we're praying for the conversion of Pope Francis. Take a look.
Prepare for all the sacrilegious communions that the Pope is authorizing, unfortunately, by saying that people like Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau, Nancy Pelosi, these pro-abortion politicians can waltz into a church and receive Holy Communion. That's just horrible. It's horrible for the pro-life movement. It's a punch in the gut. And it's horrible, especially for our Lord, who is just profaned, who is mistreated, who is completely forgotten out of the equation. The communion is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ, and we shouldn't just throw it around for political points. And so I think a pastor should really withhold communion from people who are manifestly grave sinners and who persist in that sin. They should be really withheld communion for their soul and for the good of the church and the pro-life movement.
It is really something to see that this movement for life is a movement not of kind of animosity, hatred, or anything of the sort. In fact, it is about love. It's love for the whole of the faithful, also for our children. We as fathers want to protect the faith of our children, but it's also for the love of those very pro-abortion politicians that we have to stand against, because it's their souls that are in peril. And so the move to deny Holy Communion from pro-abortion politicians is not a stance of animosity or anything like that. In fact, it is real love to do that very thing. In fact, imagine this. You're a parent. What's easier, to ignore the bad behavior of your children or to actually confront it and do something about it? We know the answer to that. So we're going to be praying the Holy Rosary. Father's going to be leading us. We're going to be praying it mostly in French, because here we are in Quebec City, also though in Latin and some in English. Please join us in this prayer of the Most Holy Rosary, in reparation, also praying for the conversion of Pope Francis. Father.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, ainsi soit-il. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tu, Iesus. Santa Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tu, Iesus. Santa Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre.
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum.
So finally, at LifeSite News in Focus, we always complete our shows with a Mother Miriam Minute. Check this out, and I'll be right back.
It's the only religion that God has willed. And are there other religions? There are false religions since the beginning of time. No question about it. But they have nothing to do with God. They are man's search, the fruit of man's search for God, because man is separated from God. And we're all born, St. Augustine says, with a God-shaped or heart-shaped vacuum, because we enter the world separated from God, fallen from God through original sin. If we leave the world that way, we will be separated from God for all eternity. God is the only one who provided the sacrifice that pleases him alone for our sin. We cannot do it ourselves. We cannot make up for Adam's sin or our own sin ourselves if we were to kill 1 billion lambs or animals. He is the only Lamb of God that has taken away the sins of the world. And unless we repent and give our lives to him through the church that he founded, we are lost. And so the Catholic Church, as you know, does teach that through whoever, through no fault of their own, does not know the Catholic Church and its beliefs, not will be saved, but can be saved.
Thank you, Mother Miriam, and all of you, especially clergy or religious, who are willing to speak out. It is very, very difficult to speak out in this hardest of hard times, especially when Pope Francis himself is the one causing so much confusion. But when you speak out, especially you clergy and religious speak out, it helps the laity to be able to understand, wait a minute, there's still one church, one truth that's unchanging, because the true head of the church is none other than Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining us on LifeSite News in Focus, and we'll see you next time.